Hello, everyone. Hi, Megan. How you going?
Hey.
Getting ready for the end of the year?
Oh, yes.
The last bit of the year just seems to have snuck up on me.
It's like suddenly realizing like, oh, Christmas presents and oh, all these things that like were the things that all this.
Yeah, plenty of time, and then all of a sudden there's just not enough time at all.
Yeah, and you look back at interestingly, Matt made us do a bit of a year in review meeting, and like suddenly all the things that you're like, oh, this was on my priority list at the start of the year and it never got touched.
But all of the things that you did end up doing that weren't on your list to start with.
Yes, definitely.
There's always lots of those. Hello. We'll wait a couple of minutes before we officially get started. We have been chatting for a while about doing something on pricing. So this is what this meeting is going to be about, and I'm recording it. So we'll actually save this as a bit of something to go back to when new people come in, so that they're kind of caught up on sort of what the pricing discussion is, as it changes all the time. So how long have we been doing this for, Bonnie?
A while now.
A while now, and pricing is a continual question that we have as we go forward. Some organizations are big enough to absorb the costs and be able to do more things for free, and other private organizations, need to, cover their costs. So there's a few different ways. That's why we do events like ClickFest and things like that enable people to trial some things and get their, profile out there for future programs. But the last few years has been nothing if not inconsistent. So every lesson that we learned in 2021 wasn't applicable to 2022 and probably won't be to 2023. So, there's things that are constants, and there are other things that are forever changing. And which is why we're having pricing conversations again. Hi Naomi, thank you for joining us. So we probably will just get started. Who wants to kind of, I guess, we've sort of got Questacon and Geoscience Australia that are probably a little bit, not necessarily newer, but maybe new faces. Do you guys have questions that you want answered? Or should we just sort of, have the conversation?
No, I'm just here to learn and absorb. Noting, of course, that we usually provide free stuff, so we obviously don't want to be a hindrance to other organisations, but that's just the way we operate, because a government organisation needs to provide free access stuff. So that's sort of where we sit.
Excellent. Well, Bonnie, it might be a great place for you to start off then, because you've seen the big picture over many years and what's changed and what hasn't. So I might throw over to you to sort of kick us off for that pricing conversation, and we can, follow up from there.
Thanks, Karen. Yeah, it's always an area of not really sure what to say, like see what changes and doesn't change. I will talk a little bit about the statistics because, 2021 was such an anomaly. So if we do look at some of the figures of what's actually happening in virtual excursions, I've been compiling some things. So in 2000 and, well, I just check my brief notes here on a sticky pad. In 2019, we had about 82,000 page views on the Dart Learning website. And in 2020, that doubled to 160,000. And in 2022, ignoring 2021, we had 337,000. So it's still doubling every year. That's kind of really good news, I think, for the space that we all work in. Even the amount of content providers that are getting information out there, that of course, I know the Dart Learning has gone from 70 to 150 in a very short space of time. And I thought another interesting statistic we had was 850 live events listed on Dart Learning platform. So that's not in for the year, just for the year. So over 4 terms, you're not really even 40 weeks when you think of how term 4 and term 1 go. There's a lot of content that's actually out there. I also wanted to point on the homeschool information. So of 7,500 teachers that used Dart Learning last year, we had 335,000 students. And if I can pop this in the chat for you, I will. It's a handy little graph because people are always talking how, no, I can't. Isn't that a shame? All right, I'll have to share my screen instead. Hang on. People are always saying how the homeschool area is really changing. And yes, it is. But can you all see that? Yep, getting nods. So you can see from the types of booking that our homeschool numbers were actually 28% of the bookings that we received. Close to 30% were what we refer to as non-DE, and the DE was 42%. But when you broke down the actual number of students, homeschool were only 2.8% of the actual students that we saw, as opposed to 37 being, and the majority being DOE schools. So that's the number of students that we're actually seeing. So I kind of thought that was really interesting as well. And maybe it puts a little bit of a light over the whole homeschool market's growing, because interestingly, the percentage of students that we had, yet again, referring to my notes, back in 2019, 6% were actually homeschooled. That's the number of students, not the number of bookings. So is it growing? Not according to the figures and the data that I can go back over. And 2020 was even more homeschooled. So I think that was 9%. So we're seeing actually the number of students decreasing, but the number of uptake from homeschools increasing. So how does that actually affect our pricing? Does it mean that you need to even have a special price for homeschools? Is that something that you think you need to look at? For the New South Wales Department of Education, I'm currently chasing up a fellow who works within the department to talk about the learning business systems. So hopefully we'll have some way that we can move forward next year with maybe something that'll give everyone in Virtual Excursions Australia some pricing that we can do as a department as opposed to individually. So hands up if that's something that would interest you all.
What do you mean by that? Like you have standard pricing for virtuals, but you don't have to charge them?
I don't know. I've got to talk to him and find out a business model. What can we actually do for Virtual Excursions Australia? Would it be a membership-based thing? Would it be, you know, a code that, okay, the department's prepared to pay for a certain amount, or whether it's just, hey, Virtual Excursions Australia are ticked off, use them. I can't tell you much at the moment, Naomi. I've just found a guy within that department who can give me some information on how we can move forward, because we've tried different models. The model we tried this year, which was more of a subscription based and a live event offered every Friday. What was it, Fridays, Karen, or does it matter? Bit of an old lady question, isn't it? Was it Tuesday afternoon?
Wednesday morning,
Anyway.
5 per term. And we did get complaints from Western Australia saying they can't participate because it was too early for them.
Yeah,
And we did, you know, we got 2,000 students, which is great.
Yeah.
But it didn't cover costs.
Okay. So this is the thing. Is it more a matter of if you are a school that has a membership to Virtual Excursions Australia, then you can attend any event, but you are subsidised because there's something in the department has something in place with Virtual Excursions Australia? That's the sort of questions I want to get answered so I can have for you. If you've got anything you'd like to put forward now, I'm happy to hear what you think might be something I can propose.
Is this a,
Oh, sorry, Naomi.
is this a discussion about virtual Excursions Australia and how there can be some pricing there? Is that what we're talking about?
Well, you are members of, as
Yeah.
in Sydney Living Museum is a member of Virtual Excursions Australia. If Virtual Excursions Australia are a vendor for the department, then there might be a big issue within the department at the moment is that teachers are subscribing and paying for too many things, and they shouldn't have to. Pretty much, I think the average is it costs a teacher $2,000 a year. The department want to stop that. They shouldn't have to pay for things. So if the department subsidises that in some way, whether it's a teacher, whether it's a school, as I said, Naomi, I'm just trying to get some information on what we can do. But I and Karen and I have spoken about this. If an organisation is a member of Virtual Excursions Australia and you run your SciFest or you run specials or something like that, then there's a department teachers can attend with some kind of a subsidy if they pay a subscription fee for annually. If the department pays, if the school pays, they're the kind of things I'm trying to find out what's the best model to move forward so that we can make paid excursions available. There's got to be equity in place for it. So that's what I'm kind of looking at, the equity that we can give to schools and teachers based around what is offered, making sure that your product has a value.
Yeah. And I think it's a little bit like what we've already been doing when we run the events, that we're running the events and the schools and participants on the outside don't have to pay. We're doing them for free, but the presenters and the organisations involved on the back end that are delivering those programs are getting their costs covered. So I'm imagining that if we could look at something like that, then we can run more themed events throughout the year, and the presenters are all being paid, but the department schools are getting free or massively discounted events. So.
That's it, and especially when we've been given. From the department now, we've got things that we're focuses for next year. So one of our focuses for next year is women in STEM. So basically that comes from the New South Wales Women's Strategy for 23 to 26. So we're looking at the participation empowerment. So any kind of events that you're looking at running with a women in STEM, that it covers that. There'll be a tag on the website that you can tag that, and there'll be promotions for that all year round. There's obviously certain days on the school calendar. So in term 1, we've got Australian Women's History Month, celebrating women who tell our stories. We've got International Day of Women and Girls in Science and International Women's Day, all in early in term 1. So we'll be hopefully letting everyone know that they're things that you could probably aim for, but you might have things on demand that also fit that. So we're really sort of pushing that on demand thing. And the other area is student careers. So if the department are looking at these particular focuses, is that something like, okay, we can get things from Virtual Excursions Australia, we can get and run things that way. As I said, just looking at different models on how we can do it. So I'm trying to do 2 things. One, I'm not sure that we need a separate pricing for homeschools, whether it just needs to be across the board, but I'm definitely focusing on the New South Wales Department of Ed schools and how we can bring equity to all those minor schools as well.
Awesome. I think that's definitely an area to keep updated for next year.
Yeah, really open to questions, guys, or really open to any ideas that you have.
It sounds great. It sounds great to have this equity and something that sort of gives a fairness to things and just makes it simpler for everybody, just a cost across the board, how it works, and the virtual excursions model and linkage and support for that just sounds really, really valuable to me. I think these are good discussions.
Thanks, Mary.
Yep, thanks, Mary. So do you find, and I'm asking you guys for your data now, because not everyone, as you know, uses the Dart Learning booking system. So with the schools that you have, are a lot of similar percentages to what I presented?
For the last couple of events we've done for Virtual Excursions Australia for Coast Care Week and ClickFest, we did have some New South Wales schools. All of them tended to be single classes booking in. But we had a large, as you said, the number of bookings were homeschools, but of course the total number of students is quite small. out of that. And we found where the school classes that were booking were New South Wales, the homeschools were across the country. So really broad range of where they were coming from. And compared to last year, which the numbers for both ClickFest and Coast Care were down, but not, we were still getting, every session had over 100 students participating. Whereas if I can look at that from 2-3 years ago, we would have just been absolutely blown away by those numbers. So I think we're seeing that settling. And of course, term 4 is tricky. And, Coast Care Week, and even I think, Joe, you had a session yesterday. A lot of the interstate schools are already finished. So private schools, a lot of interstate schools are already on holidays. So I think we were finding that for Coast Care Week as well, whether or not just the way the term was last year, that Coast Care Week kind of was actually a little bit earlier. It's hard to know. So that's something just to be mindful of for term 4 as well. But when I compared SciFest in August, those numbers to last year, they were pretty comparable on a per session event. So whether or not that is a topic base, time of year base, or lead time, it's hard to know. But yeah, the numbers were still there. Definitely lots of homeschools doing individual bookings, but the student numbers ended up being quite small. But nice to see a lot of those regional schools that were either booking their whole school in, or it was one particular class. So I think that's one of the reasons why numbers were a bit down as well. It was more of a per class basis as opposed to a per school.
One of the reasons I'm asking Karen as well. Oh, sorry, I've interrupted someone there. Sorry.
You go first. I'm happy to speak after you.
Oh, one of the reasons I was asking was wondering whether, so we're talking about free events there, aren't we, Karen?
Yes.
So I'm just trying to see whether private schools, Catholic schools, are more prepared to pay than the state schools.
I'm not sure on that one. I certainly had by request sessions, and they were coming from state schools. So I guess maybe that's one option for a lot of providers as well. If you've got your things up there by request as opposed to a fixed time, it may be that the schools that are willing to book, or they want something at a time they want to do it, and are willing to pay the price. So I certainly saw that and also wanting them to do the longer session. So for my Australian Environmental Education ones, I've got 2 prices. It's a 45-minute price and an hour price. And the buyer requests that come through often then end up actually requesting the hour price as opposed to the cheaper version. So it is certainly an option, and it just means that you're waiting for them. But that can be hard with staffing scheduling as well.
Yeah, I feel like the numbers that you showed on that graph that were the 60% department and 37% others is pretty similar for us. We get both of them booking into the paid sessions, and obviously both of them coming to the free sessions. But I guess it depends what your organisation wants the statistics on, because we don't seek out the statistics about the department or private schools. We're interested with, like, the interest in Sydney Living Museums is the regional versus metropolitan schools at the moment. So we did do a really big analysis of our statistics for the last 3 years, but it was trying to track rural schools, rural and regional and remote. How are they engaging with digital? And that's sort of really strong, like 50% and sometimes more is rural and regional. And that's growing, because it's usually the stats been 30% when we looked at, just as a gauge roughly.
And that's been this year, Naomi?
Yeah, and last year. Mostly we looked at last year. This year, I mean, the numbers, like, I feel like there was last year obviously was so busy, we had simultaneously 2 at the same time. That's how many we had. We needed to run 2 streams of virtuals. then there was a reaction against it, I think, in term 1 and 2, and we did get some bookings, but not many people were like, thank goodness we can go back to excursions. That's what we want to do. We're not going to do any more Zoom. We're sick of Zoom. But now we're finding it's stabilized a bit and people are coming back to the paid sessions. Term 4, as you said, Karen's not very busy, but we did get bookings. And term 3, I think sort of we had bookings every week, sort of roughly, but not at the same level that we were having it. So I think it'll be interesting next year to see what happens, because there's obviously been a lasting impact for digital excursions because all the teachers know how to use it and know that it is an option. So it's up to us to offer something. And I think one of the things, Karen, is in terms of the festivals that you've done, that if they know we do that, they'll come. Like we decided to set up a day a term of homeschool, and at first it was like we didn't quite get the numbers, and now we always get the numbers because I think homeschoolers know that we do that. Look for the day and we'll have a day for you, just for you. And the reason, Bonnie, we have the special pricing is because we can't think of another way to do it. We charge $10 for the children to come from homeschools, and we charge $65 for a class to come. They can't join a class on their own, so we have to give them a special pricing. So
that makes sense too.
That's how we've found that it works.
And that's it. And you do want to be able to work across the board, you know. So sometimes there's a bit of pushback because they're private schools. Sometimes there's pushback because they're a little school, you know, and we've only got 4 students and it's not fair. And there's always, you know, going to be different situations. Interesting when you say, Naomi, that we offer something. One of the things that we're looking at doing is we're trying to be very proactive for the next year, because we've been doing this for a long time, but it's cemented there. And like I said, people know about what's there. So in that proactivity, we're also hopefully over the next couple of years going to look at specifically offering things based around when teachers are teaching them. So as much as we've got our school calendar and we've really grown that, Dart Learning are now working across other units within the department to see, okay, well, when are you delivering that particular content? Well, when's it going to make sense for our content providers to offer those things? So as much as, you know, you've been doing ClickFest, maybe ClickFest would be better off in another time of the year, but you know, obviously we'll stick with the status quo at the moment. But I just wanted to let you know that's what we're looking at. We're looking at being proactive in that. We're looking at hopefully being able to write resources over particular content, which obviously you all have your education department, unless you work in a very small team, Mary and Megan, and you know, you maybe don't have the resources to get extra things written. Hopefully we can work with other areas within curriculum within the department to help write that content across things and get things presented. So that's where we're looking at going, so that when you're offering something, it is at the right time of the year. So you're not like, why aren't teachers taking us stuff up? Because they're focusing on different things. So
that's going to be really, really useful, because
it is.
We assume that some schools are teaching things when they link to other external things. And we used to see it across the board that sometimes, you know, NAIDOC week and reconciliation week stuff would be like in the end of term 3 or term 4 or the beginning of the year. So I think that'll be really useful for us to know that, because we can then do our marketing as well in terms of the newsletter or Facebook to say, hey, teachers, a lot of you are doing this. You know, these are all our providers that have topics related to that. So I think that's going to be really excellent. And it'll be interesting to see whether there is consistency across, you know, the thousands of schools, or whether there is that sort of, you know, but even if we know that there's 2 peaks, you know, X amount of schools do it at this time, X amount of schools do it at this time, it's still great for marketing.
Yeah. And with it's same with all the new curriculum that they're releasing. This is where your on-demand stuff's great. Teachers can just go and look and think, okay, I can utilize that. And the by request as well, Karen. Like I said, you get a few, you get uptake from that, because like, okay, it suits me now to be looking at that. So that's why, you know, we still tag things with what's relevant. Then here's a big thing, they have to be relevant. If you go tagging your event with everything and it's not relevant, teachers just go, nah, wasting my time, and they will stop looking. We'll lose audience from that. So it is something to keep in mind. So yeah, pricing, it still is that big one, isn't it? Right here for everyone, and we don't have a perfect answer for it as yet, but heaven knows we're working on it.
Thank you, Bonnie. I think that was still really, really useful. And it's always food for thought to think about, you know, what happened then, what's next, and how we can move forward. So look, very interested to know what happens if you found the right person in the department to help you know, us all take that next step next year.
Thanks, guys. Yep.
Are there any other questions for Bonnie before we move on?
I was just going to comment that it probably would be kind of useful to know when teachers are teaching staff, because particularly when we're looking at potentially subject areas that we don't have on-site excursions for, or maybe we're trying to get in like high schools, and we can't all be experts in every single curriculum. So it's like, well, what is the flow of the year 9 and 10 history like? And just is, for example, Anzac Day and Remembrance Day the best time to be doing those like topics around kind of World War I, World War II, or is that a different time of the year? Like, to be able to allow us to also create new content that may fit perfectly in one particular unit of work for a curriculum that we're not focused on. So I guess, and being able to then share that with other creators and potentially also open up discussions about collaborative sessions as well.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Yeah. And that's where we've been working. So I presented to the Math statewide staff room last week, secondary, and they're screaming out for curriculum enriching excursions because they don't want to teach in isolation. They want to be able to find something interesting and put it across, like, you know, the Bureau of Meteorology and how they use math, and Museum of Human Disease and how they use maths, you know, rather than just, yes, this is exciting math, because it's not. And we do not have a lot of content for math secondary on the Dart Learning website. So they have given me a couple of providers they would like to see, but yet again, there's an example, Megan. Maybe there's something that you would have that you could integrate into math somewhere. If there is, maybe it's worthwhile, as I said, me reaching out to the maths curriculum people and seeing if they'd like to work with you, or finding something, like I said, if they've got a topic they want to cover, who in our group could actually help. When I say group, I'm talking about the 140 content providers who can help with that. And you've got to think outside the box. So yeah, it's just making sure that the communication's there between everyone for that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that we did this time last year was a piece of evaluation to help us understand a little bit about what teachers were looking for and interested in. I gave a little bit of feedback on that end of last year or beginning of this year, but I think it's just important at this time to revisit that a little bit as well. So one of the questions we asked was, what is important when you're looking to book a program? And one of the things that came up as most important was actually that it's fun and entertaining as well, links to the topic areas, provides access to experts, and aligns with the curriculum. So they're the kinds of things that they did want it to be linked to the curriculum. They did want to have, you know, this opportunity to connect with people that they wouldn't be able to usually, but also that it was fun and engaging. And then we also followed up with that, was asking, you know, what are your student outcomes after attending a virtual excursion? And the two things that did come up really well, again, was that, you know, provided a fun and engaging way to get the students engaged with that topic area. And it increased knowledge on that particular topic area as well. So the teachers were saying that this is what they wanted to book and why, but they were actually seeing that with their student outcomes as well. And I think that was really important. Bonnie, you wanted to add to that?
Thanks, Karen. Yep, just a couple of pointers. You're right, student outcomes very focused, whether it's just something like a question at the beginning and a question at the end. So teachers then can say, well, they didn't know that at the beginning and they know it at the end. The other thing I really wanted to point out, which is something which would be worthwhile you looking at, is delivering a series of events. So rather than the one-offs, they're very much looking at, you know, one of four, or running kind of shorter series of events, so that we talk about virtual excursions being they're enriching and they are a conversation starter. So if, for instance, we're looking at doing a, you know, teaching kids to get their L's, it's a very big thing in regional areas. So trying to engage Year 9 boys to read. This way they're actually doing a bit of reading. They're all desperate to get their L's. So at the beginning, hey, have you got your L's? No, you haven't. And then we do a series of events, you know, and then at the end of it, they'll have read and got their L's. That's the kind of thing that we're looking at. That's very, very large, but you could possibly look at doing something similar for what you're going to deliver, because the department is really interested in that. And I think it really helps any teachers, homeschool, private, whatever, otherwise, with those outcomes like Karen's talking about.
Thanks, Bonnie. I think that's really good to hear that that's a big push from the department side as well. So how does that kind of link to pricing in terms of what the teachers are looking for? So we also asked them, they had further responses in terms of, the other things that they saw coming out from their students, the ability to ask questions. And I think that's why they liked the live events and the by request live events versus maybe on demand or pre-recorded, because then they the student questions that they have at the time can get answered. Giving them a different way of teaching. So, instead of doing X in the classroom, having, even as a virtual excursion, it changes the dynamic. It gives them, a different way of, a different thing in their toolkit to use. So teachers were quite keen to use that as well. And with pricing, we had 86% of respondents said that they were willing to pay a price under $100 for a live interactive session. And what was interesting, it didn't have to be exclusive. So they were happy to be in a session with another school for that up to $100 price. So I think a lot of the time we think have that exclusive. It's like, well, we'll make it a higher price, but it's just a one school. So a lot of them were quite happy to have other schools or other classes within that session as well. And then that was, when we did the survey, it was up to 6 schools within that. So, more realistically, it's probably, 4 or 5. But yeah, so anything more than 1, they were still happy to pay. 50% of respondents would consider paying over $50 just for a one-on-one. So it was interesting that was definitely a lower price point. And it may be just the fact that they'd already asked the previous questions that they just weren't, responding to it properly. But 10% of the participants were willing to pay over $150 for that one-on-one experience. So that is something to consider as well, making that very, very special, exclusive. You can't get this anywhere else. Very much value for money. And we did have lots of the homeschools and regional schools and the small schools, as Bonnie was saying. They were more interested in whether there was a per student price. Everyone else was very much happy with a per session price or a per class price. But when we got down to those homeschools and those smaller regional schools that have 6 kids, they definitely, for their value for money, thought a session per student price was more appropriate for them. So whether or not, again, there's that small school, homeschool opportunity, that special kind of once a term that Naomi, they're offering from Sydney Living Museums, that could then even that out, that you've got your full price for your bigger schools or bigger regional schools. And of course, not a surprise to anyone, pretty much everyone said they're very happy to participate in free events. So it's trying to find out the combination that will work for your organisations. And I guess putting my Australian Environmental Education hat on, when I'm working separately, I've got my sessions up as by request. I've got on-demand sessions that link back to my website, that essentially programs that I've previously delivered that then link to my website with curriculum links and downloadable resources. So it's actually bringing traffic back to my site as well. And then I tend to do the themed, timed by request, but I am happy to do free ones as well. So every now and again, if it's, say, Threatened Species Day, and I'm like, this is a information building, it's a marketing opportunity for me to get Australian environmental education out there more broadly, then I will do some free sessions as well. And I'll often do them shorter. So it might be that the free sessions I do that are half an hour, whereas the by request sessions are 45 minutes to an hour. So that's kind of the model that I look. And, when especially with the new tagging system and linking to the separate events schedule, every time there's a themed event that Dart's promoting, my sessions that relate to that are tagged and get pulled into that. So that's where I'm finding that I do get direct by request from schools that are willing to pay that price. So I think it's having that combination has certainly worked for me. And it's not that I'm getting by request inquiries, you know, every day, every week, but they are, you know, it definitely is coming through. And I definitely see the spikes with the website and the viewing of the YouTube pre-recorded stuff. So I monitor that, and I can see when maybe a class has done it or a school's done it, and there's a little peak, because it could be that there's 3 or 4 classes in the same year and they've all watched it at the same time. So it is worthwhile keeping an eye on your analytics off your website and off your on-demand content to see if there are those little spikes. And chances are, particular school or a particular, you know, teacher cohort has sent the link out to a bunch of people saying, okay, this is what we're doing in this term. You know, these are a couple of resources to use, and, you know, they're picking and choosing it, and they're getting used at that point. So probably not a lot more information than we all know about having a bit of a variety, but it's good to be able to see the evaluation does reflect that teachers are willing to pay, and they're willing to pay, you know, over $150 for a bespoke subject, and that they are willing to pay that little bit less amount for something that's got multiple schools. So that's something definitely to keep in the background of your mind. Are there any questions on that? Excellent. Well, Megan, I know that you had sent something through, a little bit of a review that you did a little while ago. Did you want to just maybe have a bit of a summary of that? And that was more looking across the variety of other organisations and what they were pricing.
Yeah, so as some people may know a bit, like, so 2 years ago, I started working full-time here at the Maritime Museum. And at that stage, I was like, well, virtual excursions, let's look at what everyone else is doing. I also sent through a second document, I think, Karen, which is, I literally earlier this week went through Dart and looked at everyone's pricing. Interestingly, most organizations have not changed their pricing in 2 years for paid sessions. There was only a couple that I noticed that had put the price up, and a couple that had changed from a few free sessions, of course, are now paid. But it was really interesting just to kind of see the vast difference and variety in the pricing. So obviously, I don't know in terms of how many people actually book this at all. What my museum, the Maritime Museum, does is we have all of our free webinars, and then we charge $50 per class of 30 for our paid sessions. Now, we have not done any marketing on our paid sessions this year and had very, very, very few bookings. So I'm looking to totally fix that up next year. But it was interesting kind of going through and seeing that some organizations are $50 or less, some organizations are $200-300. A general trend tends to be the per class. So most of the kind of organizations are per group of 30, and some of them will then allow multiple classes in the one session. But yeah, I think actually, can I share this in chat? That is probably the thing to, let me just see if I can.
Do you want me to share the one that you sent me, Megan? I can share screen.
I sent a second one as well. Let me just.
Is that the Word doc version? I've got this one.
Yeah.
Is this the one?
Yeah. Yes, that's the new one, which please ignore the lack of formatting. This is literally what people have on Dart right now. And so it was kind of just interesting to see. I'm interested to know, like, kind of from everyone else's perspective, there was definitely no, I guess, consistency in the pricing. But yeah, the one trend tends to be it's per class. So I know we have occasionally had a tiny bit of, I guess, pushback if the having multiple classes in the same session, or why don't we get a discount sort of thing. So my gut feeling is that you have a certain price for like the first class and then a smaller price for subsequent classes. I think that's what I want to move to next year. The really interesting one is Museums Victoria, which has an educational booking fee of $35. It's right down the bottom of this one. It's not currently on Dart. It was just, I knew they did them, so I looked it up. But yeah, massive variety there. I'm sure Karen can email this around to everyone. But yeah, I don't know what else to say other than it was fascinating to also see that not much had changed in 2 years. So no one's really come up with a brilliant kind of answer.
Yeah, and it is, you know, looking through, it's everything that we've seen over the time. It's interesting that, you know, some programs are 80 minutes, which is, you know, obviously, well, hopefully for high schools. Most of
that one was a senior,
yeah,
like year 11 and 12 one.
Um,
But yeah, generally, in some organizations, it was really interesting. They had some sessions were 30 minutes, some sessions were 45 minutes, some sessions were 60 minutes, but they didn't necessarily change pricing. It was kind of more to do with what the topic was and what the stage was, because of course, younger students, shorter session. So yeah, some of them had different ones there.
But yeah, we're definitely seeing those prices from, you know, $50 all the way up to sort of, I think I saw 300 or 200 something there is the Museums of Victoria one. And yeah, if you're happy with that, Megan, I can attach it to the minutes.
Yeah, it's also really rough. I did it kind of in a bit of a rush, so it's just, it was more to give myself an idea as well, kind of what everyone else is doing. And I think it's, yeah, sort of the other interesting thing is that there are bits that are missing of organizations who don't currently have their programs for next year up. So it might be worth just having a quick look early next year, kind of once organizations have kind of worked out their offer. Kind of some of that information may change.
Excellent. Well, Bonnie definitely wants a copy of it, and you want to add something to that, Bonnie. I've seen you put some stats in the chat too.
Is the chat recorded or not?
Yes.
Okay, so you don't need. That's all. Wonderful work, Megan. That's brilliant. I wish I could have helped some way. We could have, compiled some data, but you've done a brilliant job. Love a copy of it. Thanks. I'm going to give you a job.
Yeah, the other interesting thing just to notice going through, and I think it's just something for general, is that there are occasionally like providers whose links are broken, or just weird things like it's a free event, but then they have a cancellation fee applies, and there's sometimes, I guess it's probably quite easy if fields change or your website changes or things like that. And it was just a reminder to me that kind of come the new year, I'm going to go through and double check everything on all of mine, because particularly with that on demand or kind of by request content, it's so easy to forget to update things. And so that was just something else I thought I'd mention.
Oh, well done on that too, because we have actually got like Leanne and Jan in our team looking at excursions all the time. And some of you have probably had calls from them individually about things that need fixing up. Another big one to watch, which they're currently working on at the moment, is going through all those on demand ones and looking at the end date. So some of them, one provider who had heaps of them listed, I'm not going to mention any names, had the end date at 2021, so wasn't getting any views or any inquiries on anything because there was no press here to book button. There was no there was no way a teacher could actually see how they could go about doing that. So have a look at your end date as well on your on-demand stuff.
Yes, I discovered exactly the same thing when I was updating for the new tagging. In terms of the events coming up, I had a lot of marine stuff and I hadn't tagged any of them Coast Care, and I went, oh, that's about to expire like in 2 weeks kind of thing. So and it is tricky because you put things up there and you think, oh, 2 years, that heaps far. But of course, life has caught up with all of us, and all of a sudden 2 years have gone like that, and your programs have dropped off. So yeah, definitely worthwhile considering just going back and double checking links, anything that changes. Even myself, I'm on my website all the time, and I occasionally will make changes and I'll find a dead link that's somehow snuck its way in.
Well, and plus the school calendar as well, Karen, you know, we're adding to that all the time. So there's lots of stuff on that school calendar now that you could look at tagging. So.
Yep. And I think, yeah, as Bonnie was saying, try to make it relevant. You can, you know, I was looking at a lot of the marine ones. So, you know, there's Sea Week, there's World Oceans Day, but, you know, World Environment Day, we could still, you know, pull that in. Threatened Species Day, you know, September is Biodiversity Month. Even Earth Science Week pulls in a lot of sort of the environment side as well. And of course, Coast Care Week. And, you know, you can always pull it into Science Week as well. So, you know, try to be a little bit creative, but don't just, you know, tick everything, because as Bonnie said, people will, if they keep seeing the same thing pop up and they don't think it's relevant, they might, when it is relevant, they might just ignore it. Excellent. Well, thank you for everyone for participating in this. As I said, it is going to be recorded, so we've got this as a bit of a record for us to refer back to and build upon, you know, in 2023 and beyond. But are there any more questions specifically related to sort of pricing and scheduling?
Just thank you, Megan, for that. That's so interesting to look at it like that. Thank you very much. Yes,
very. I did send some random emails out going, "Ooh, I remembered people doing reviews, just wanted to see if there was an update." So I really appreciate you coming back with all of that. Very, very useful.
Yeah, it was something I've been meaning to do for like all year and never actually done, because that is like in early next year, I'm going to totally rewrite our 2 paid programs and change how we price them, change how we model them, get our casuals to deliver them so I don't have to do them all. So it was going to be part of that anyway. So also kind of, if anyone has any ideas or anything about that, let me know, because yeah, I'm very much an open-minded and also an open book to share what has and hasn't worked for us too. So let me know.
Excellent. Thanks for that, Megan. It's really great too. Well, that's what Virtual Excursions Australia for in these meetings is, to share all of our learnings over the years, and the fact that, you know, even if we've been at it for this long, we still, you know, come up with the same questions and the same roadblocks. So yeah, it'd be really great to hear what your thought process when you start going through that change as well. And there could be might get you to chat about that early next year once you've decided on a plan, and yeah, just reach out if you do need some more assistance. Other than that, essentially next year we've got, what is it, February 16th. I've sent out the save to date. We've got the mini conference. We've got 2 international speakers coming in, and of course Bonnie will be joining us as well to talk about 2023 and what we can expect. And what we can look forward to. It's going to be hopefully a very stable time to sort of recharge and renew, and you know, have just smooth would be nice year going forward. And hopefully a lot of the teachers are back in sort of their schedule, so they know what things they want to do as incursions, excursions, but also they've now got this amazing resource of extra virtual excursions that they can tap into as well. So hopefully we see a little bit of a consistency and maybe that building of that market back up again. So we'll be chatting about that at the mini conference as well. And following that, we'll have our first Virtual Excursions Australia meeting of the year as well, which is usually a lot of, you know, a planning conversation, looking at that sort of calendar and schedule, discussing different grant opportunities and those kinds of things, and different collaboration opportunities for 2023. So thank you all for being part of Virtual Excursions Australia in 2022. It's been a wild couple of years, and it's really great that we've seen some really great increase in the variety of teachers that are coming on board. You know, as Bonnie was saying, doubling of the traffic on DART website every year, more teachers, more homeschool. So, you know, it's all about being able to share our educational content as broadly as we can, and virtual excursions gives us a great opportunity to do that. So look forward to working with all of you again in 2023, and thank you so much for being part of it.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Karen.
Bye.
Been great, Karen. Thank you so much for everything you do with Virtual Excursions Australia
Yeah,
as well.
thanks.
It's a great group.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Thank you
Karen.
for all the organising.
Yeah.
Karen.
You are welcome, everyone, and have a great restful holiday. And yeah, can't wait to see what 2023 brings us.
See you guys.
Thanks. Bye.
Excellent. Bye,
Bye.
everyone.